When I first started building APIs, I used to have issues with arranging my endpoints, testing, file structures, how to deploy, how to get my commands in check. But over time, I got through all those milestones pretty easy. And today, I'll be walking you through how to build an API, write tests, and even Dockerize it for deployment. Let's get right on to it. So you might be wondering why FastAPI among other frameworks. I would say the top leading Python frameworks currently in the market are Django, Flask, and then of course the newbie in the market, FastAPI. So unlike Flask and Django, FastAPI brings a lot more to the table, and I guess it's a lot less code. FastAPI, just think of it as a lightweight version of Flask, which makes everything so much easier. Plus the whole Python being synchronous and FastAPI having the feature of being asynchronous, and also having the out-of-the-box OpenAI schema, which gives you like documentation. You don't have to document all that, unlike previous frameworks. And a whole lot out of the box. Hopefully, we'll test some of those limits. So for the database, I decided to go with SQL, a stable, lightweight database that is very much similar to the scalable Postgres and MySQL used usually in production. This will be our testing, and of course, it uses almost identical same configurations when working in production. And I'll explain more when we get to that bit. Let's jump right in. So to get us started with building an API today with SQL database and Dockerizing it, the first thing we want to do is create a virtual environment, and the simplest way to do that in your console is to run python/module virtual env, then the name of your virtual environment. So this created a virtual environment, as you can see, but in the case where this doesn't work, then you probably want to pip install virtual env, which I already satisfied. So now that we have a virtual environment, to get within our virtual environment, we now run source in activate. So now we are within our virtual environment. So think of a virtual environment as a box where you put your libraries for a specific project. So when you export those requirements, another developer somewhere can pull your project and get the same exact libraries. I'm talking about the same exact versions of the same libraries to use for your project. So you see pip list gives us a list of items we have in our virtual environment, and it's empty. And to get us started, we'll be installing FastAPI, and I think the all is what we need. Also need python.env, then the SQL Alchemy library, which we use to manage our database tables and relations. And what else?
So next, we need to open our project directory. We can use whatever code editor. I use VS Code. And you can see our virtual environment. Let me pull up this console. It's easier to work with. So
you should have FastAPI and all that already installed. So first thing I usually do in any project is to add a README.
So let's add a configurations file. Hi. This would have everything we need to set up our application. Let's just bring in data. Of course, FastAPI. So and okay, for now let's have that. So let's first things, let's create the simple API and just have it return hello world as every base Python or every base programming application. We have our config, we also have our main.py, and in this main.py is where we'll be defining the core endpoints. So let's do from, which basically means we're importing everything we have on this file into this, and we can repeat the same process for other files. So that gets app.get special JSON. The content of our response is says, and we also have to say this is an API response. We need to add a status code, which is very sorry about that. So as you can see, this is how simple it is to like create a Python API with FastAPI. So to run this, so now we use UVCon to run our application. Sorry, that's spelled. So what this does is deploy our application, and we have only one route set, which is the default route which says hello world, and this is the endpoints. And let me take you straight to Postman, and I have the endpoint here. So if we hit it, get a message that says hello world. This is what we define here, hello world. So next in line, we want to add our database. So to add our database, let's create a file. Let's keep this over here, so we'll reference the tables we need. So I'll be doing everything on the fly, so it makes sense as we go. So for this, we'll be needing a few other stuff from Alchemy. So let's create engine, data, 8 job, and 4 the string. We need it all of itself. So from the ORM, we also need this session. Yeah, define our connection instance. Let's bring all of this back to our config file. And now we define our tables. So first we need to add a database URL. So let's do it in our config. So in future, we get to reference it from. And to have an SQLite database, you just need to add SQLite. And this should create a DB in our local directory. So back to our database, let's define our tables. I think we also need one thing, find the engine. So echo true just helps log. So whenever we are running, we kind of see logs of whatever is being done. The queries being sent to the database actually logged on the console with this set to true. So the first inline would be our books table.
Fast forward, this is our full list of tables for the database. So we have an author, which has a name and an ID, references back to the books. We have a genre, which has an ID and a name, references back to the books. Then of course we have the book, which has a title or references to genre, has available count, has the creation date, has the author, has the genre. Then of course has a to JSON binding. So now we have our full tables prepared. We would want to migrate them to our database. So think of it as creating a first instance of our database. So to do that, let's quickly just run the scripts. So you'd see, so what happened here is, so it converted these table class representations to and kind of sent those SQL commands to create those tables in our database. And here's the SQLite database we had created for us. So I think that's it for our tables. And as you see, or you might have noticed, all the other the book table itself is dependent on both the genre and both the author, in the sense that in the sense that each book has an author and each book should belong to a genre. So just to reflect that change and avoid any issues, let me quickly delete this. Let's delete that and let's rerun the migrations. So now we have our database, we have our configuration, we have our simple web server setup. So just before we start writing our endpoints, let's dive into some tests. So I prepared a long test file. I'll just paste that in so you guys could see. So we currently already have the hello world, which was the endpoint we created, demo endpoint we created. So we have that. So we test that first. Then next one, test fetching for books, which should return an empty list initially. Then test fetching genre, test fetching authors. Then we try to add a genre. Then we try to add an author. Then we try to create a book which inherits this genre and this author. Then we try to update the book. Then we try to delete the book. Then we try to update an author, try to delete an author, try to update the genre, try to delete the genre. So this covers create, delete, updates for books, same for authors and same for genres. So this is just like an extensive test script following test-driven development to kind of go through our entire application and test all the endpoints, make sure it flows end to end. And to quickly test this, so you'd see that we don't have any of those endpoints set up. We have to declare this. First, we have to run our server, and while it's running, then we run our test file. The first test pass, that's this, and we are blocked on the second test, which is get notebooks. And this is because we do not have the endpoint for fetching notebooks. So let's quickly add that. So rather than putting it here, we could easily just have it here. Or to keep kind of a code architecture, I had created a new folder called routes. So within our routes, I created the routes as a modular folder. So in the sense that once we import any endpoints from this folder, they are all called from this line. So we don't have to individually say from .books imports. So we have the author books.py genre. So let's start with the books. And from here, we'd want to import from config, import this. So just so we have like a general access to all the other data. And it's not absolutely necessary, but we'll test that in a bit. So from database, we'd want to import this session which we use. And considering this is the book file, we want to import that book model. Then use import session. So the session gives us an access to the database instance from within the script. And now we define our endpoints, get books. So define get books, and should return a list of strings, if any, or let's expect to return a list books from bb. So now what we'd want to do is books. We use the session to get all the available books we can find on the database. So query book all. This ideally would return a list. So we want that. So we want to do this for book in books. Want to return the book.toJSON, which gives us this JSON representation of the book, which we want to pass as our output in a JSON response. So for JSON response, content pass JSON books, then we pass our status quo, getting books, which should be 200. So this should work now because we have new endpoint. So we should have our test pass here. It's not passing. I think we need to restart our server. So restarting our server, we can run. So you see it passed the test of fetching books, which should return 0 items, and you see the test pass here. So next test that's in our way, where's our test? The next test that's in our way is getting generous. So for that, we basically want to just copy this out and do the same for generous. Sorry about that. So basically the same step. So now we have that for generous, should work. Let's save that, save this, save our test, and let's run it. So I believe there's another way to run this with hot load, which should be Python main. Okay, I don't think that ran it, but okay, let's quickly check the FastAPI documentation. So it says we could use this FastDev. So I know that command will help with hot loading. So hot loading is the case where we make changes to our application, we save it, and it automatically gets updated on the server side. So using that command actually gave us some problems with our imports. So seems it doesn't support circular imports. It's giving me no module name. So let's do this. I forgot to save that. Getting the same issue from the books. Let's just stick to the UVCon for now, as that is what we'll be using in production. So app.get books. So it's meant to import from config. That works. So where is it? So we are back on track. So let's run our test to just see where we are at. So we've done with getting books. Getting generate is not working. So it's on the URL. So let's fix that now. Run our test. Yes, so that worked, and we're meant to also do the same for authors. So let's quickly do that. Quickly do that. So this should give us our list of authors. Quickly save that and run our tests. Yes, so that works. So we have our full get request for all 3 endpoints working. So now let's move to the creation endpoints. So this is creating generates. Let's go back, and to create a generate, we use a post request. So this post generate now. So to add generate is what it should look like. So I'm using a custom class which comes up the Pydantic base model. So this is just like a regular class I used to kind of define the payload I want for writing data to the database. And for generate, we just need the name. The ID is auto-generated. So here's how it works. So the user adds the generate information. Following our test script, you'd see it's just basically a payload JSON which passes the name of that generate, science fiction, and our endpoint gets that data representation of this object, and it converts that to our generate row, which is now written into our database and committed, and the output is given back to us, and a status code of 201, meaning created. So in a case where the validation of the data is not there, take for example, name is not passed or something else is kind of wrong in the specifications, we get this fallback error which says could not add generate, returns a bad request for 1 status code. So that should work for adding generates. So it says 405 method not allowed, meaning we didn't get to this point. So it's more of a server error. Yeah. So let's check what the issue is. Adding a generate. We did not save our file. I keep making that mistake every time. So let's run this. So you see it worked. So quick test. Let's just run through the other endpoints we need to add, then we'll get back the main course. Do the same for adding of authors, and we also need to do the same for adding of books. So the adding of books is going to be a bit more complicated. So we need the new book objects as new book of this model, which should have the following fields, and you see those fields are actually passed into the objects, the payload, which is then passed down. So an extra step of validation we would need here is kind of validating if these authors that are being passed in this JSON, because the data comes like this and we need to validate if they actually exist and return an error if they don't. So let me add a comment here, and to do that we do author equals session query or find id, sorry, not find, but filter by, so filter by id, which should be this at first. So if nothing is found, or better still, to make it more readable, if this is none, then you return a JSON response 6 content which says error valid auto id, and status code be for 1 minute by request. So we did this for the author, and we also need to do that for the January, since that's another reference table. So January, so this just helps us validate our data to be here, be on the table before actually passing it to the database. Let's save that, see how far we go with our test this time. So it seems to have an error, name author is not defined, so it's failing on add in book. So adding the book, the author is not defined. I think it's on our import. So yeah, let's just import everything from there. It should work. Nice. So we went past creating a notebook, and the next blocker is updating a notebook. So updating a notebook is similar to creating a notebook. The only difference is here we're adding a new object, while for updates we are looking for an pre-existing object to update. So how that would look is something like this. So we define the routes inclusive of an ID which references a specific book we want to update. So we pass the book ID, then pass the data for the new book. So we have book filtered by ID, finding the book. If it's not found, we return an error, and once found, we update based on the values passed the object. That's for updating notebooks. So for deleting, which is pretty straightforward, so deleting a book, still dynamic. So what it does, finds the book, deletes the book, and awesome. So we have our create, read, update, delete for the books. Let's quickly add that for the generates, then go through the test again. So this is for updating generates, and this is for deleting them, which would need to do the same for. So I've added all the endpoints. So we now have create, update, delete for authors. We have for generates, we have for books, which should then go through our entire test cases, which covers updating the notebook, deleting the notebook, updating January, deleting January, adding notebook, and also like viewing them together. Because whenever you fetch a notebook, it kind of fetches the resulting Januaries and all that. So what do we have here? Let's save and run our tests one more time. We have an issue with deleting author, where we try to delete an author. Let's quickly check on that endpoint to see if everything is fine. So this returned error, and it looks like an SQL error. Go to the name offset catch. So let's do something fresh here. Let's delete all the chunk or catch or wrong data we have on our DB, and let's do it all with the fresh database. So create our tables, start our app, and we'll run our tests. So it looks like all tests passed, and it was failing because of some bad entries we had from previous tests. So everything seems to work. Run it twice, all tests pass, and that looks good. So next thing in line is running our deployment. So to run our deployment, we need to add Docker. So if you're not familiar with Docker, it's a containerized way to handle deployments. Quickly pull the definition up. So the Google defines Docker as the platform or as a service product that use OS level virtualization to deliver software in packages called containers. So just think of it as a mini machine for your application only. So we kind of wrap this mini machine around your application, so it's easier for other people to kind of pick up your application in a different machine and have exactly the same dependencies and run it exactly the same way you run it when building and following the same steps. And it's just a way to define steps. So the file that defines the step is what you call an image, and when you run that image and you're running your application is where you call it a container. So in draw form it's called an image, while running is called a container. So that's Docker. I already have it installed, so you can install it based on your system preferences. We'll quickly check. So I'm quickly just trying to check the state of Docker on my machine. If I run it, so it's disabled. Let me quickly start it. So Docker should be active now, so you can check based on your machine. I think if you have a Mac or a Windows, simply opening up your Docker desktop should make sure your Docker is in running state. So mine is running. So to get our Docker instance set up, we would need what we call the Docker file, which is defined as a set of rows, as I've explained. Then I'll also be adding a Docker compose. Think of it as a configuration file for your Docker file, just so you don't have to run the Docker raw commands. You just use Docker compose up and Docker compose down to build and delete your application instances in Docker. So what we need now is a Docker file. So from our Docker file, what we need to do is first of all import our image that we want to use to run the application. So the image is more like a OS, so we could import maybe a node image, we could import a Python image, and in this application we are using Python, of course, so we want the Python image. So I'm going with the Python 1.3. So if you go to the website, you can see a whole list of open source images you could use for whatever application you're building. And what we want is a Python image, so we can run our Python application. And you can see I picked a specific slim image. So these are the different tags available, and I think I picked something I've used before, which is quite stable, which is 10.8 slim, something around here, which is this. That defines our image. So next command is defining our work directory. So within our container, I want to set it as app. Then next, this basically just copies everything in our current directory. Once we run this Docker file, it copies everything in our current directory to our app file. And next, we want to install our pip installations. That's our requirements file. And my bad, we do not have that file yet, so we need to do pip freeze. So this is where we package all our requirements from our virtual environment. So this runs pip install. We want to look at directory. This installs our requirements. Then the last is running the deployment command. So using uvcon, we want to run our application, our main from app. And being that this is a deployed version, we want to host it on our container spot so we can access the application from outside the container instance. So we want to host it on the container's default IP address, hence why we want 000. And for ports, we want it routed to a specific port, and let's go with 5000. Okay, let's go 5000. So we have that. Just before we go any step further, let's add no file. Basically what this does is helps our Docker file whilst running this copy command. We can kind of ignore unwanted files like cache, mypy, and most especially the virtual environment, because it will kind of increase the size of our Docker image. So let's do that. I think those are the two files we don't need. Matter of fact, we can even go ahead to delete this, as we won't even be needing it for reference at all. That's that. So we could easily build this container with Docker build. We do Docker build t, then the container. This should run, but I generally prefer using a Docker compose because it kind of keeps everything arranged. So using the Docker compose, it will look something like, we'll add a Docker compose file. It's not like a
configuration for Docker. So services, let's name our app API demo. Then to build it, we get our context from the root directory, which has the Docker file. I want to check. Then for ports, the default ports for all running applications or containers is usually 8,000. So port starts from 8,000 when we run the application to 5,000, which is what we want exposed from the container. And for environment variables, there's something to help us with logging. Then finally, let's define the volumes, defining where our source is to our final destination on the container. So it looks like we are good to go here. What's left is running the application to make sure it works. To do that, we have to do docker compose up build. This is property environment. Okay, it's wrong spelling. Environment. Let's give this another go. It needs permission, so this is load. So now we successfully building our application. So you see it's going through the steps. So it just pulled the container. Let me close this second one. So it just pulled our container. It's working on this directory. It's copying. It just copied. It's running the installation now. So you see it's running the installation. So after this, it should run our application. Awesome. So it ran our application smoothly, and just so we could. Oh, sorry, I quit this. So let's quickly. So we don't need the build command. Let's just have it up and running. Should be up now. So to quickly test this with our existing test scripts, let's quickly update this. So apparently, I think to get the port 5,000 some sort of, we need to set up some sort of firewall. So let's do this. Let's use for 8,000 all the way through. So to bring the application to kind of remove the already built image, we use Docker compose down. You see that cuts down Docker images. Let's go again. Awesome. So our image is running. Let's quickly test this to be sure. Running. Awesome. So we have our endpoint running on port 8,000 and it's running from our Docker container. And now let's quickly test again. Let's test it with our pre-existing script, which tests the endpoints. Test. Awesome. So you'd see all our tests passed and we've Dockerized the application and it's not running from our machine. So we could literally take these Docker images with this file directory to any server or any machine anywhere in the world. And once we run Docker compose up, it should run our application smoothly and it should be passing all the tests. So there you have it. We created a FastAPI with SQLite and attached Docker compose and Docker to handle deployment and packaging of the whole application. Please leave a like and please like and comment down below in the comment section if you really enjoyed this or found this really helpful. And always remember, I'm here to walk you through simple to-dos like this. And if you found this helpful, please click the subscribe button down below and like and comment this video. Let me know your thoughts and how you think I could have done this better, or what parts you think I might have missed, or what important steps you think I might have missed I should be careful of in the future, or generally any tips you have regarding the application so far, or if you have better ways of doing this, I would love to hear it in the comment section. So see you next time. Bye.